Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. If you are new to the show, we're going to take as many questions as we can in the next hour or so. So if you've got nutritional or health related questions, fire those into the chat or into the feed, and I'll do my best in the next hour to get as many answered. If you missed Tuesday's show, go check it out. It was all about light therapy, UV light, red light, infrared light, near infrared, far infrared, all the above. The freest medicine and some of the most powerful medicine in the world. And you've most likely been told that it's dangerous and will cause cancer. So if you haven't watched my show on light, go back and check that out. You won't regret it. So let's dive into today's topics. Before we get to questions, I just wanted to make a commentary on the recent lawsuit that's been filed against the CDC. If you haven't seen that, posted about it on Facebook earlier this week. But there's a few doctors now suing the CDC over the schedule for children, where they roll up their sleeves and go to the pediatrician. If you get my gist. Anyway, I think it's about time. They're actually the suit itself is based on the fact that nothing has ever been studied in its entirety for the quantity of treatments that kids are receiving. In essence, the safety studies are already, in my opinion, not super great. But when you combine multiple treatments over the first 2 years of a child's life, you can get into even more trouble. And this is what they're suing the CDC over. So if you haven't seen that, you should go check it out. You can look it up. But they're raising money for this, and I think it's an important cause. I gave money personally to donate to the lawsuit. If you can't donate, go share it and support it in that way. But if you can, donate, because this is a battle worth fighting for. If you guys remember a number of years ago, when my son and I sued Texas, we sued the state of Texas and we sued the school board here because they were trying to force that type of treatment on my son as he was going into college, and we ended up winning. It's largely thanks to many of your donations. We ended up winning that lawsuit and making sure that that doesn't happen to people. So these types of battles don't come up very often, but when they do, I think they garner our attention and they garner our support. So go check that out when you get a moment. Okay, let's dive into your questions. Let's see here. Let's see. In the sun through the day, by the evening, the upper back itches like crazy. Land clearing, manual work, prep stuff for disposal. No sunburn, surprised. Am I still getting too much sun? If you're not burning, probably not. I mean, what's known as the minimal erythemal dose is a sunburn, right? That's when you when you get so much UV that it creates damage to your skin. So I wouldn't suspect that. Now you can get some itchiness from the sun, and depending on your diet, if you're not I think there were several questions about people going out in the sun and just being a little bit more sensitive and having either itchiness or having some sensitivity. One of the most important things that you need to make sure you're modifying your diet toward is getting out of the seed oils. The seed oils themselves are highly oxidative oils. And if your diet consists of a large quantity of omega-6 oil and a low quantity of omega-3 and a low quantity of saturated fat, it makes it harder for the cell membrane around in your skin cells to protect you from radiative damage. And so you can be more prone to that type of symptomatology. So make sure you're avoiding seed oils, make sure you're getting your adequate omega-3s, and make sure you're eating enough animal fat in the form of saturated fat. I know that's the bad fat, right? Everybody talks about that is the fat that causes heart disease. Not really. There's no evidence that shows that saturated fat causes heart disease. There's plenty of evidence that shows that hydrogenated saturated fat, which is man-made vegetable oil with forced hydrogen, that's a different animal altogether. So make sure you get some good animal fat in your diet, get your omega-3s up. If you want to do specific testing, there's testing you can ask your doctor to run. It's called an omega check, where they can look at the percentage of concentration of omegas in your cell membranes. And that might give you an answer, because if you're below 5% omega-3 in your cell membranes, that's step one, is getting that number up somewhere in the 8 to 12% range. We see that all the time in the clinic, where people are, unfortunately, when we initially test them, they're like 3, 4, 5%. Typically, and it's one of the first nutritional changes that we begin making with folks, because it has such a profound impact on their body's ability to regulate inflammation. Let's see here. Do the red light earplugs actually improve hearing and reduce tinnitus? It's a good question, Brenda. I don't know. I haven't used them, or I haven't experienced the use of red light earplugs. I've experienced red lights for the eyes, and certainly red light, for soft tissue or musculoskeletal injuries, nerve injuries, and it works for all those things. But I've never actually had any patients in the clinic where we've attempted to use any kind of red light earplugs in that regard. Let's see here. As my DH is over 3.5, has been over after 3.6 years, I still can't tolerate direct sunlight. It gives burning feeling and itchy sensation on the skin, even after a few minutes. Can this still improve? Yes. Going back to what I just said a moment ago, check your fats. And also, consider getting your antioxidant nutrients measured and looked at too, because antioxidant nutrients, if you're low in vitamin E, if you're low in glutathione, and even vitamin C, those are things that can make you more or less subjective to sunlight irritation. So strong antioxidant status equals robust sunlight exposure tolerance. What does high serum amino acids mean? High serum amino acids. So I wouldn't use serum amino acids as a measurement tool to understand amino acid levels. They fluctuate too much, Vic. And because they fluctuate so much, you could get a reading that's high today and low tomorrow, depending on the diet, because those levels can be changed quite quickly. So not the best way to measure it. I don't understand the second part of your question. There's too many acronyms you're using. If you're talking about liver detox, if you've had a test that showed some kind of problem with liver detox, be more specific in what actually was measured, and I can give you a better answer. What's the best way to reverse or stop the progression of cataracts? Find out why they're happening. For many people, cataracts are fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies, particularly vitamin A. Such a critical nutrient for the eyes, and people, because they don't, we've had, a couple of decades now of war against meat and war against animal fat, which is where you get the vast majority of your vitamin A. So a lot of people have vitamin A problems or vitamin A deficiencies that contribute to the development of cataracts and other eye diseases and sight vision loss. So I would start, there. If you're just thinking, okay, maybe take some vitamin A, but I would start with measuring nutrient levels first and foremost. You might also look at red light therapy for your vision as well, for your eyes. It's now, there's some really good research coming out on red lights and eye regeneration. So I think worthwhile, because there's no one knows a guaranteed way to stop the progression of cataracts. There are common sense things that we can do. There's nutrients we can look at, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it's about long-term progression of oxidative damage. And once it's there, how do you stop the progression? You quit doing the things that led to it in the first place, and that's unique to the person. Is low-level laser treatment considered red light? and is it effective in treating hair loss? So it's not something I've ever used in terms of attempting to treat hair loss. My experience, Wanda, is that the best way to treat hair loss is making sure you have enough protein and making sure that you are not um, not being overstimulated with environmental toxic exposure. So eating well, especially the focus on protein, nutritional density. You need to make sure that your biotin levels are normal, that your zinc and copper levels are okay, that your vitamin C levels are okay, because those nutrients can cause hair loss. And then toxic exposures, you want to minimize those wherever you can. A lot of people have developed hair loss because of the hair care products they use. They're full of chemicals that damage the follicles and end up leading to hair loss. What red lights do is they help the mitochondrial function in the cells. They speed up energy production, and that tends toward supporting healing of all kinds. But at the end of the day, red light therapy, I wouldn't say it's a catch-all. You certainly could attempt to use it, but you would want to look at these other things as well, because I've seen more hair loss by default in my clinic, where people have come to me not necessarily for hair loss, but they've come to me for other problems, and they also have hair loss. And when we fix those other inflammatory problems, their hair loss improves and they start growing hair again. You should check out, if you haven't already, I have a whole show on hair loss, and we talk about a lot of strategies in that realm that you might find super helpful. If our skin has photoreceptors, then can exposing it to light interfere with our sleep? I mean, exposing your body to lights affects your sleep in all ways. I mean, you have photoreceptors in your skin, you have photoreceptors in your eye. Where a lot of the control, though, is in your eyes. In the back of the eyes, where the eyes cross over, where the nerve fibers of the eyes cross over. So that's where light therapy is going to predominantly affect your circadian rhythm, your sleep cycle, your hormone production, your ability to heal at night when you're resting, your overall quality of sleep. So I would be more, that's where I would be more focused. So if you're out at night, if you're on blue screens, or if you're up looking at TVs, that kind of thing, where you're being exposed to a lot of blue light, that's a bad idea. And that's a quick way to deteriorate, what you're referring to. So a lot of people will wear blue blocking glasses at night. I mean, you could do that. I'm not a fan of wearing glasses. It's just me personally. I'm not saying they can't be helpful, but just turn the devices off. I mean, we live in such a society of dependence on devices. Just turn them off and have some peaceful time. Get some good incandescent bulbs that emit a nice red soft glow, and get the blue light out of your life, when it's bedtime. My dermatologist said after 4 small operations of basal carcinoma to not be in the sun, or to put 50 SPF sunscreen on. I think it's terrible advice. Sunshine doesn't cause skin cancer unless you're sunburning. We talked about that on Tuesday's show. But my experience is that most dermatologists don't have a great understanding of this. They just kind of, this is true in a lot of medicine. This is just my opinion, but a lot of doctors espouse rhetoric, and they don't really challenge the status quo. They don't really challenge the paradigm of what they've been taught. And you look at medicine, it's a very successful business model, but ultimately, right now, it's in its whispers of the death throes that are coming its way, because people are fed up with drug this symptom, drug that symptom, don't eat healthy foods, don't go get sunshine, like all the different parameters of medical advice over the past, 50 to 70 years is now being proven to be wrong. And we have an internet where this information can be shared at light speed. And so people are waking up to the fact that spending $4 trillion a year on medical care that keeps people sick is not in my best interest anymore. And they're getting educated. You guys are getting educated. So anyway, I've been experiencing hair loss and I suspect a vitamin B1 deficiency, taking a B complex now, and my urine turns bright yellow. right away, all day, does it mean I'm not absorbing all wasted in the toilet? No, it doesn't. It means you are absorbing it. That's the great thing. When doctors say you're just peeing it out, you're not absorbing it. Well, first of all, understand what absorption is. Absorption is what happens when you put something in your mouth and then your GI tract takes whatever's in the tube of your gut and it brings it into your bloodstream. That's absorption. So really formally, we want to look at absorption as your body's ability to get it from your mouth into your blood. So if you're seeing yellow in your pee, then we know you're absorbing it. It's going from your mouth through your gut into your blood. Your kidneys are filtering your blood, and then you're seeing riboflavin come out in your urine. That's what the yellow discoloration is. It's actually vitamin B2. And most B complexes have a higher dose of vitamin B2. So usually they're anywhere from 20 plus milligrams of B2, and that'll turn your urine yellow for the course of the day. It doesn't mean you're not absorbing it from your GI tract. It just means that your body is going to expel through your kidneys excess B2 if it's not using it or if it's not needing it. It doesn't mean you're wasting your money. It just simply means your body is expelling the excess B2. Let's see here. Can histamine problems give you hives? And symptoms like needles on your skin? Yes, it can. And if you're taking DAO enzymes, you can still have histamine problems. DAO can help, but depending on the severity of how bad your histamine response is. Sometimes what we do in the practice is we couple DAO. We have an enzyme product called Ultra DAO, and we couple that with something called Histassist. And Histassist is a mixture of vitamin C and bromelain and quercetin and nettle. And what it does is it stabilizes the membrane. It helps to stabilize the membrane around your mast cells, thus reducing quantitatively how much histamine is aggressively being released. So when you combine that type of formula with DAO, a lot of times that's enough to get dramatic reduction and histaminic skin response. So I'm gonna put a link in there for you on that one. It's called Histassist, and you can check it out and read more about it there. But you might try adding that to your DAO. But ultimately, you really want to understand why you're having histamine problems. Again, like what drives histamine problems underlying. Allergies can certainly do it, including food allergies. Environmental allergies can also do it. But mold is a big one too. Mold can really drive it. And so can estrogen replacement therapies. I know a lot of people are talking right now with the Women's Health Initiative study the findings being reversed. Everybody's talking about women should always have access to hormone therapy. And I agree. I think they should have access to it if they need it. But you have to understand there's a cost to any kind of estrogen related therapy, even if it's bioidentical. If you let your doctor overdo it, when you overstimulate estrogen receptors, you increase histamine response by your immune system. This is one of the reasons why women have more allergies than men typically is estrogen. And so just think about that in terms of if you're using like birth control pills or if you're using an estrogen hormone replacement therapy and you start developing hives or you start developing histamine type symptoms, you might ask your doctor to more frequently check your levels and make sure you're not being overdosed. Because what a lot of people and a lot of doctors are doing nowadays is they're trying to give 60 plus year old women estrogen levels of a 30-year-old woman. And they're calling that longevity and they're calling that anti-aging. And I call it madness. I think it's irresponsible. That's just my opinion. But I don't think using estrogen is irresponsible. I think if your quality of life is horrible and awful and you've had a hysterectomy, partial or total, or you have the severity of lack of estrogen, you should be trying to get a level of estrogen in your body that is conducive to your age, but not conducive to youth. I mean, I see problems all the time in people when they're chasing that fountain of youth. There's always a cost. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul. Everything comes at a cost. It's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to pay the side effect price. And again, with estrogens, that can be increased histamine response. Can one who has a weak, not a weak, can one who has a wheat or milk allergy overcome it with time? If it's an IgE response, maybe and maybe not. It depends. Generally, if it's a strong enough, like a class 5 or 6 IgE response, not likely that that person will overcome it. But if it's a subacute, class 1, 2, 3 level response, a lot of times those are overcomable. So it depends. Can you recommend a pre-PET scan protocol that would help minimize the damage caused by the scan? So those of you that are getting, and that's our M's question. So those of you that are getting a PET scan or scheduled to do a CT, know that you're going to get hammered with radiation. So the question is there a nutritional protocol on the front side of that you can front load to help reduce the potential for radiative damage? Yes. Well, first of all, I would say we'll get to your answer, but I'll say this first. Question why you're getting a PET scan, question why you're getting a CAT scan. A lot of doctors want to do these scans and they're not always necessary. Sometimes it's overkill. And where an ultrasound might be enough, or a less radiative procedure might be enough from an imaging perspective. But as a business model, PET scans and CT scans pay the bills. They are very expensive, and they can bill your insurance for a lot more than say other imaging model types, like an MRI or even an X-ray or an ultrasound. So that's always a question I like to ask when somebody's making that recommendation. I actually had several. This is probably, I guess it's been almost a year now, maybe a year. I was advocating for a family member in the hospital, and anyway, it was in the urgent care facility, and I wanted to do a CT scan of her brain, and they hadn't even examined her yet. They hadn't asked her any questions. They just simply wanted to do a CT scan just because. Which, if you're in an ER, a CT scan is about $20,000 billable to insurance. So, my first question, they rolled into bed to take the patient away to do the CT scan. So I'm like, wait, what's going on? He's like, well, we've been authorized to do a CT scan. I said, by who? Well, the doctor. I said, doctor hasn't been in to see the patient yet. You should probably make sure that happens before you order a test that delivers a tremendous amount of radiation unnecessarily. This isn't something we need a CT scan about. There's a whole different kind of problem right now. This is a blood sugar problem, not a CT scan problem. Anyway, I had to chase the CT tech out. Then I had to chase the PA out because the PA came in and tried to bully us. And then the doctor finally came in. And ultimately I chased the doctor out. I said, doctor, when are you going to do the exam on the patient and actually qualify this person that may or may not need a CT? I don't think they need a CT. Anyway, the doctor started to do the exam, and I watched the doctor do the exam. And, not to be a horrible critic, because I know they're busy and they're trying to do their jobs, but this doctor didn't even know how to do a neurological exam. So to me, what that said is that we have a very busy ER where people who aren't qualified are running around doing things and ordering things that aren't necessary, and that's a red flag. Anyway, long story short, what things can you do to protect yourself from the radiative damage if you absolutely need one of these procedures? I would give you 4 things to consider taking. Number 1, glutathione. Preload with glutathione for a week. About 500 milligrams a day would be a good amount to consider. Number 2, preload with vitamin C. About 5,000 milligrams a day for a week. Number 3, alpha lipoic acid. Preload with about 800 milligrams. And then number 4, preload with tocotrienol, which is a vitamin E antioxidant. Very powerful. So these things all work together to support your body's ability to combat the type of damage that occurs from these forms of radiation therapies. So doing those things about a week before loads the body, and then about a week after is, for any lingering effects, it's going to be helpful to support your body's ability to get through that, hopefully with less of a problem. Now, if you're doing any kind of dyes, if they're injecting any kind of radioactive dyes, which oftentimes they do on these scans, You might want to consider using. We have a product called Ultra Liver or Ultra Metal Detox, and it's what I use when we have people going in for these types of procedures. It's generally what I recommend in our practice. And I'll put a link in for you here on that particular product. But it's a mix of different things that help the body metals, and which is what many of these dyes are derivative from. So using this as a prophylactic and preventative, and even after the fact, we've seen people that went in for studies still have the radioactive metal dyes in them 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later. Some people are really good at removing these things and others are not. And this is where, that extra layer of nutritional support on the tail end or the front end can go a long way. And I'm going to put a link in the feed for those of you watching that want to check that out. Let's see. Next question here. Can hiatal hernia be treated? Yes. Usually with hiatal hernias, it's food induced in my experience. Like the food itself is inducing the damage to that tissue. And when we get that food out, the body knows how to heal. The body always knows how to heal itself. And so we see, for example, a lot of people with gluten sensitivity develop hiatal hernia. And when we get that taken care of and change their diet, and they go back in later to visit with their GI doctor, a lot of times those hernias go away, they're healed, the patient becomes asymptomatic. That's been my experience. So food can be a major trigger, and that's where I would start if you haven't already. Go get a copy of my book, No Grain, No Pain, and read it and follow that diet for 30 days and see how do you feel within that realm. And, like I said, you might have an experience like a lot of people that we talk with. Do you need higher doses of taurine to make use of the osmotic regulation when there are barometric pressure changes like hurricanes? I don't even understand what you're wanting to accomplish there. Are you trying to fend off a headache as a result of a barometric pressure change? Maybe give me a little bit more detail on the logic behind your question. Can MS be reversed? If so, is that something your office could help us out with? Yes, MS. I have seen MS reverse. We actually have, Norma. If you go to my YouTube channel, and there's a playlist under there's a category, and it says playlists. And if you look at the one that I think it's testimonials, we actually have, as a woman, you'll be able to hear her story on MS, where when she first came into me, she was on a walker and limping with loss of motor coordinative function in her feet. She had a special device put on her leg to help her muscles contract and flex so that she could walk with some semblance of normalcy. And it was kind of a clunky thing, but anyway, she's an example of MS reversal. We took her MS, and now she's jogging and running and doing the things that everyone else is doing. I have also seen cases where, depending on how advanced they are, but I had a case a number of years ago, to give you an example of what we saw with her. She was wheelchair bound, and we got her out of her wheelchair to a walker, but she couldn't progress beyond the walker. And I suspect in her case, it would just the damage was just too advanced, because she was coming to me like 40 years into active disease. But if you're on it fast, we see early cases of MS diagnoses really respond well to diet and lifestyle change, based on our process. It's definitely something you could call my office on. I'm going to put a link in the feed if you want to reach out, but give me just a second. But yeah, reach out and you can talk to one of our staff and schedule a consult, and start with an initial conversation. And I'll, whether you see myself or Dr. Driscoll, I'll give you an honest answer as to my opinion after a good consultation, because it's just part of the answer to that question just depends on the case. It's a case by case basis, but MS is typically very responsive. Should people with celiac disease avoid dairy products 100%? I have celiac disease, but I still tolerate dairy well. I wonder if they are harming me without me knowing it. That's a good question, Diana. The answer is generally yes. Let me explain. If you have celiac disease, if you are using dairy in your diet, there's a protein in dairy called casein. And casein has molecular homology or mimicry with gluten. And so what happens is people go gluten-free, but they continue to consume gluten or continue to consume dairy. And when they're a lot of times when their doctors are measuring on follow-up, they're still finding villus atrophy, they're still finding inflammation in the GI tract, even though there may be some symptomatic improvement in the patient, meaning it you can still improve being gluten-free and not dairy-free, but a lot of people will see plateau, and then we'll see persistent inflammatory damage and persistent problems that aren't going away when they continue to consume dairy. Now, there's a caveat to that, and I have, if you haven't watched I have a crash course on dairy because there's a lot of nuance there. But so, for example, there's an A1 dairy, and then there's also an A2 dairy. So if you've never heard those two terms, just go to my YouTube channel and type in dairy. Is dairy safe for gluten sensitive, or is dairy safe for celiacs? And there's an hour and a half or so long class on all the nuances of dairy. But I would generally say a lot of celiacs can get dairy back after an initial 6 to 12 month restriction, provided the dairy is organic grass-fed A2. But even in some situations, no, they still can't get it back. Forgot to turn my phone off here. Give me a second, guys. There we go. Let's see. So question is, can people share their cancer? I'm not 100% sure your question, but my grandpa had brain cancer, coughed stuff out. Sister was a toddler, was his favorite. She developed cancer, rhabdomyosarcoma in the head, and died not long after. Can people share their cancer? I wouldn't say we can say definitively yes. What I would say is cancer has triggers, and one of the predominant theories on how cancer develops is something called the infectious theory of cancer, which is where someone has an infection, whether it be viral, bacterial, parasitic, or fungal, and that those types of infections can increase or contribute to the development of cancer. So is it possible that your grandfather and your sister, shared an infection and that contributed to both cancers? Yes, it is. It's possible. But it's not, we wouldn't say, okay, cancer cells jumping from one person to the next is not generally, I don't know if that was your question or not, but that's not something. Now, the other thing that's quite common that people can also share would be their learned behaviors, right? So depending on how much of an influence your grandpa had with your sister, if they lived together, ate together, shared an environment together, there certainly are environmental triggers and stimuli that can also drive cancer as well. I just had a couple of years ago an entire family. The parents died of cancer. One of the children died of cancer, and there was a sole surviving child that didn't get cancer but got out of the house. The house ended up, it was a house that was riddled with mold, and so mold was driving this entire family toward cancer. Taking a Lactobacillus reuteri fermented product gives me rashes. I suspect histamine. Is it okay to take vitamin C, NAC, quercetin, bromelain to calm the rashes and continue eating L. reuteri? I would, and if your body's having histaminic response, that's your cue to back off. as a general of thumb, I wouldn't try to suppress those things with, with antihistamines, natural or medicative. Now, what I would be doing is I'd be looking for mold in the environment, because oftentimes when people have lactobacillus histamine responses, they're living and being exposed to mold. They're living in it or being exposed to it. And sometimes it's environmental mold, and sometimes it's mold in the intestine itself. So like fungus, like a yeast, Candida albicans or Geotrichum or Rhodotorula, are different types of yeast overgrowths that can occur in the GI tract and drive histaminic responses as well. How often do you recommend checking vitamin D levels when supplementing? About every 6 months. You can do it every 3 if you want to be more cautious, but about every 6 months is a pretty good time frame. Generally, I have people test their levels going into winter and coming out of winter. And that's just because I want to make sure that we're supporting them at the time of the year where they, especially if they live, farther north where there's less sunshine, that we're supporting them in those times where they can't make as much. Let's see here. I would like to have food allergen testing done. Do you perform IgG and IgE tests? Yes, we do, and more. We do more even than IgG and IgE. Do you think the incandescent red bulbs at a pet store are good red lights? In what regard? I mean, you'd want to know what the way, depending on what you're trying to use them for, Tanya, and also depends on the wavelength of the lights that the lights are emitting. So if you get that data, that would give you a better indication of what what are you trying to use them for. Is it true of the dangerous floods in Texas? Is what true? More specific, I don't know what you mean. We've had some really bad floods, but is what true? How to avoid colitis? You got to change your diet. Go no grain, no pain. Start there. A lot of people just no grain, no pain is the ticket, right? They resolve their issues. We've seen it in thousands. Start there. It's a simple, low-hanging thing that you can do right now. And if that doesn't help, and that doesn't help you resolve, then you really want to consider working with a functional doc who understands autoimmune. Can near infrared light make it through clouds? Yeah, so the thing about infrared red lights is that their wavelengths are long. As a general, the longer the wavelength, the deeper and the more that light can penetrate. The shorter the wavelength, the less penetrance. And so when you look at the spectrum of light, the ultraviolet and blues have a much shorter wavelength. When you get into the reds, that wavelength starts to really expand, and again, they just have deeper penetrating power. So yes, they can make it through clouds. I use red light on my eyes and face for 4 minutes a day. The tips of my ears start hurting, not red or burnt. Should we cover our ears? That's an odd symptom. Are you sure you're using a good company? I mean, there are a lot of companies that are fly-by-night companies that are producing products, in my opinion, that are maybe not so great. So it just depends on, I mean, you certainly could cover your ears, but you shouldn't need to. Your ears shouldn't hurt as a result of red light exposure. So it makes me question the product you have. After having eaten gluten-free for decades, the physician told me to eat normal diet for 3 months just to check if I have celiac disease. just so that I could have a discount for gluten-free food. What's that discount going to be, Ann? And seriously, um, I know there's a tax incentive now, but I mean, in the course of a year, you're talking about tens of dollars, not thousands of dollars of tax savings. So to eat gluten for 3 months and wreck your health, all for the sake of some tax savings. And on top of that, when you're buying gluten-free food, if it's got corn and rice in it, which is where those tax savings are implicated, those corn rice-based gluten-free substitutes that aren't really gluten-free, I mean, that food is shit. Excuse my language. That food is bad stuff. Why would you want a tax discount to buy those kinds of foods? It just doesn't make sense because those foods aren't going to help you restore, maintain any great health in anyway. So real food is gluten-free. I mean, vegetables are gluten-free, meat's gluten-free, nuts are gluten-free, etc. If it's real, it's, in those ways, it's grain-free. If it's grain-free in a real food, it's gluten-free. And it's going to cost what it costs. But people, it's just my experience, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but it's just my experience that people that try to buy all these substitute products pay a price because they're ultra-processed foods. They typically have corn and rice, quinoa, or other gluten-mimicking problematic foods in them, and they're highly processed with other additives, and they just don't serve you in your endeavor to be healthy. But anyway, that's my opinion. I definitely wouldn't eat gluten for 3 months. I mean, wreck your health for 3 months for a discount. To me, your body and your health are worth more than that discount. Okay, so I see you're in Finland. So maybe there's some difference in Finland with the US, but it is normal. Doctors, in order to give you a celiac diagnosis, they want to do maximum damage to your intestine before they measure. The problem with it is, though, let's say you eat gluten for 3 months and you feel awful and do awful, and they do a biopsy and your biopsy comes back negative, because that happens all the time. The biopsy tests that GI doctors do, they're not guaranteed to come back positive. And a lot of times, I had a patient one time, 19 biopsies were negative. The 20th one was positive. And it took her like 30 some odd years to get a diagnosis. So you just don't want to eat a food that you're avoiding because you feel better avoiding it, so that the doctor can do a test that may or may not give you a diagnosis. To me, the diagnosis is less important than the reality of understanding that you need to eat a certain way to be healthy. Can you tell me whether or not, Debbie's asking, can you tell me whether or not red light therapy is beneficial to use on the thyroid? I've seen some early preliminary data that there's some good things in that regard, but I don't think we have enough pooled information, at least research-based, to say, yes, everyone with hypothyroidism, go get red light therapy for your thyroid. I would say if you want to do red light therapy, Debbie, in the safest way, go outside. Go outside, lie down on your back, and expose your neck to the sunshine on a regular basis. That's free red light therapy. Will red light help reduce glaucoma pressures? I've seen some people where, yes, that was true. Again, I just like the last answer, I don't think we can make a broad statement that says that's a true 100% of the time. I think it partly depends on why your pressures are high in the first place. And there are many reasons why that can be the case. So we want to be real careful with just saying red light is the cure and catch-all for everything. It's not to say it can't be beneficial, because ultimately one of the primary roles of red light therapy is that it accelerates the pump inside the mitochondria that generates energy, ATP, and it speeds that process up. So when your body can make energy more efficiently, more quickly, it can do a lot more in terms of healing and repairing. So as a generalization, we could say that red light helps the body to heal, period. but I don't think we have enough like data on that particular condition to say yes, red light therapy at this wavelength for this quantity of time over this distance of time is what's necessary to optimize, glaucoma pressure, for example. I was abbreviating. Will amino acids stay high if the liver is stressed? Will amino acid levels stay high if the liver is stressed? Which amino acids? This is a general rule. Amino acids aren't going up because the liver is stressed. There's certain amino acids that are used more aggressively when the liver is stressed. I mean, cysteine and glycine and glutamine are all used to drive the production of glutathione, which is what digs the liver out of the hole. So maybe give me more specifics on amino acids, that you're referring to directly. I'm in the garden from 5 to 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. Do I get any benefits or do I need to be in direct sunlight? No, you get benefits, Fran. You get benefits from being outside. There's so many benefits. One, you can be grounding. Two, you're getting light from the sun. Earlier in the morning, the more red light you're getting, whereas later in the day you're going to start getting exposure to more UV light. But you're going to get the circadian benefit of light connecting with your eyes, which generates the regulatory balance of melatonin, one of the most powerful cancer-fighting antioxidants known to man, but also important for quality of your sleep and for the regulation of your circadian cortisol rhythm. So tons of benefit there in the early morning light. Is there a regimen you recommend if you have been bitten by a tick, even without any symptoms, for prevention of vector-borne illness? No, because treating with powerful herbal medications can affect the microbiome, Melissa. And so I wouldn't want to treat somebody preemptively just because they were bitten by a tick if they're completely asymptomatic. Kind of like tetanus, you could step on a rusty nail and you may not be exposed to the bacteria that causes tetanus. So you wouldn't want to give an antibiotic just because, or just as a preventative measure, at least not in my opinion. Similar to that. Now, if you captured the tick and you took it in for analysis and you found that tick did indeed was a carrier, then yes, then treatment would be more merited and recommended, because we know that tick that bit that person was a carrier and possibly and likely delivered those bacteria into that human host. Let's see here. I left my supplements in my car for a week. Oops. Not melted, but stuck together. We're in the luggage enclosed in a pocket in a shaded area. Can I take them, or could weird reactions have occurred in the heat? Depends on the supplement. Like if it's a mineral like magnesium or calcium or zinc, probably be just fine. But if you're talking about omega-3s or probiotics or like vitamin E, I mean, if you left them in a car and in the sun, the likely the temperatures were pushing up over 100, and if that was for an entire week, you probably got some good oxidation of the products themselves. I mean, you could always open the bottle and smell, look at them if they're discolored or abnormally colored from what they are supposed to look like. That can give you some insider clue. But as a general rule, I wouldn't, if it was left out in that kind of a heat for that period of time. I would be cautious. I like this. So Melinda says, after trying multiple things for tachycardia, choline finally worked. what's the best dose and length of time to replenish choline? There's not one magic dose, but I would do a 6-month stint is really safe to do, and anywhere from 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day is a good range to kind of think about. Have you addressed red light masks? Are they any good? They can be. I think part of it depends on the company and the strength of the light itself. What can cause you to wake up in the night with leg pain, not cramps, but feeling like your bones are in pain? So you're talking about just intense, sharp pain in the bone. Very, very commonly, gluten we see cause that type of pain. I don't know if Christina, if you're on a gluten-free diet or a grain-free diet at this point, but you might strongly consider that as a potential possibility because food is and can be a driver of that type of pain. And probably I've seen that drive that kind of pain that you're describing more than anything else. Would I recommend breast cancer screening periodically? Would I? No. I mean, my wife is never going to get a mammogram ever. Not because I tell my wife what to do, but because that's our belief. Look, it doesn't make sense to screen for a cancer by radiating you with concentrated doses of radiation and damaging your tissue in the process, especially when you consider how many of those procedures come back falsely positive and put women in 6 months of panic and stress. There's a really good book on this topic I think every woman should read before before they have the ability to make an intelligent decision about whether or not they should do a mammogram, because generally the doctor's not going to give you this information. They're going to push it because it's standard of care. But get the other side of the equation of knowledge. There's a good book called Overdiagnosed. Go check it out at your library. Get it on Audible. They have it in an audio version. You can buy it. You can buy it from Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. It's a great book written by cancer researchers who talk about the horrific problems associated with overdiagnosing breast cancer through the overutilization of mammograms. I would say if you're just trying to be, let's say, preventative minded, a better type of technology that won't radiate you, but can tell you about components around your breast tissue would be to do thermography. And what it does, it picks up on heat changes in the breast tissue. So for example, cancer tumors have increased vascularity and increased heat. So if you're doing thermography, we'll detect those if you've got like super hot spots in your breast. But so it's a non-invasive procedure that is non-radiative. And so if you're looking to do some kind of screening or preventative investigation, that's what I would recommend. The other thing you should know, and a lot of times, a lot of the lumps and the bumps that women find in their breasts, a lot of the cystic dense breast tissue that causes false positives on mammograms, that stuff can be caused by iodine deficiency. And we have epidemic levels of iodine deficiency in the US, in large part because of fluoridation of the drinking water. Fluoride causes iodine deficiency. And, we've been pushing not we, I haven't been, but, healthcare has been pushing the fluoridation of water for decades, and only recently have lowered that recommendation. But that, hyperfluoridation causes iodine deficiency. And that leads to lumps in the breast. It leads to dense breast tissue, which again can show up positive, falsely positive for cancers on a mammogram. So get your iodine levels checked as well. If you've got something like that going on where you're palpating and you've got like painful nodules or dense tissue, get some iodine in your system. Get your iodine levels checked, and then if they're low, get some iodine in your system. Not. Let's see here. Someone asked about red light brands. The top three: Red Rush, Platinum, and Juve. Have all three. Prefer the Red Rush 360, but gonna set the all up when I move to a bigger house next year. Well, thanks for your feedback. So there's some brands that I like. The Platinum personally myself. I own a Platinum LED red light, but Juve does have a good company. Now there's another good one called Kineon, Kineon, and they make a nice elastic red light band that you can wrap around joints like shoulder joints, elbows, etc. That's mainly used for people that are trying to get injuries, chronic injuries, to heal. I know when I was in mold and I had a shoulder problem that just wouldn't go away, and it was mainly because of the mold. But red light therapy was definitely helpful in that regard. But it even helpful, it didn't the injury didn't go away until I got out of the mold. But the red light therapy was helpful until that point. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on routine colonoscopy? Okay, so I answered the question about mammograms. I'm not a fan of routine screening, and I'm not a fan of routine colonoscopies either, just because you're at a certain age. What I am a fan of is a colonoscopy if you're pooping blood and pooping mucus and you have a major problem and you don't know why. But I'm not a fan of just because it's kind of like I'm not, age doesn't necessitate colon cancer. Behavior does. The risk factor for colon cancer is not age. Behavior is. And so doing a screening because you're 45 to 50 or older, to me, never made sense. Routine screenings are, in my opinion, the ways that doctors can drive a regenerative business model of recurring customers. And that's my opinion. Take it for what it is. If you feel more sound in your mind at night when you go to bed because you've had that colonoscopy and you're at peace, knowing that it was clean and normal, then that's the right move for you to make. But to me, the mammograms radiate you. The colonoscopies, look, what we think about what that is. You're trusting that a hospital employee didn't have a bad day, properly cleaned the equipment, because they reuse those colonoscopy cameras. They reuse them, so they've been up how many other people's, and were they properly cleaned? Were they properly dealt with? Hospital and environments where these procedures are done are notorious for being contaminated with bacteria that have antibiotic resistance. And so you run the risk of inoculating yourself with somebody else's microbiome that maybe was not so good, because a lot of people go get colonoscopies because they're sick. And, if you happen to be an unlucky person on somebody's bad day, what are they inoculating you with inadvertently? That's one of the risks. There's also perforation risks. They can perforate your intestine with those cameras, and that's a very dangerous thing. So, the risk benefit is what I encourage any of you to think about and look at. And, the risk benefit is, what's the risk of not getting one versus the benefit of getting one? And that includes the psychological benefit. Like I said, if you sleep better at night knowing you've had one, then that's a benefit for you as a unique person. But as far as me and my own, I'll never have a camera in me. Unless I absolutely feel like my intestines are dying, there's just no way I'm letting anybody put a camera up me in the name of age. Take good care of yourself, and yourself will take good care of you. And you don't need to run cameras and other things through you, invasive things that have the potential for negative consequences. I just found out that Play-Doh contains wheat. To follow no grain, no pain, do I need to wear gloves when handling Play-Doh? I would. I don't know, maybe, why are you handling Play-Doh? Maybe work in a nursery or work with kids or grandkids, but I'm pretty certain they have gluten-free varieties of Play-Doh as well. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but it was a number of years ago. And there were some varieties, not off-brand varieties, that were wheat-free. I have a confirmed allergy. Let's see here. No, not a question. Any suggestions on you mean Huntington's chorea, Patty? You talking about the neurological disease, Huntington's? One, get your diet right. No grain, no pain. Get your nutrition levels checked. Get checked for infections. Definitely get checked for infections, because this is one of those where sometimes parasites or fungi can cause nerve damage. And there's a lot of good anecdotal evidence coming out now on some of the deworming medications being beneficial for some of these chronic neurological diseases. And so those are just areas or avenues I would encourage you to explore. Let's see here. Personal genome analysis reveals I have gluten sensitivity and a susceptibility to psoriasis. What should I do? Go gluten-free. Psoriasis is an autoimmune disease in many cases caused by gluten. So start with no grain, no pain. If you haven't already, start with no grain, no pain. The book. Go read it, follow the 30-day diet. If it's helpful, keep following it. But if you're genetically predisposed to gluten, you need to be away from it. You need to not eat it, because the way to activate those genes is to consume it. I have a friend who was just diagnosed with 3 bulging discs and is in a lot of pain. Are there options other than surgery? Yes. Depending on the size of the discs and the location of the discs, typically it's more common with discs to be either in the neck or in the low back, the lumbar spine. And depending on their size, one of the most effective therapies to get some relief initially is something called spinal decompression, Kersey. And these are a lot like traction tables, only they're better than traction tables, because the computer mechanism in them allows for a nice pull, creating a negative pressure on the disc without tensing the patient up, whereas traction can sometimes be too aggressive. But look into decompression therapy. Also look into McKenzie. Depending on the level of pain your friend is in, McKenzie exercises can be very effective at helping with bulging disc pain or discopathy. The other thing, and I have seen this be the case, I don't know if your friend had trauma, like if there's a car accident or some type of exercise accident or fall, but I have seen so many people that I used to run a chronic pain clinic when I first graduated. It was a chronic pain rehab clinic. And what we saw time and time again was if you changed their diet, the pain would dramatically improve regardless of the size of the disc. So they could have a really big herniated disc, and you change their diet, and their disc pain would improve even if their disc size didn't. So, that would be another avenue. No grain, no pain, combined with decompression therapy. You might have encourage your friend to see a good chiropractor who specializes in disc repair. Probably of all the doctors specializing in herniated disc, chiropractors, hands down, one of the most effective treatments in the world is just chiropractic care. So that would be something else to explore. What is your take on JAK inhibitors for treating alopecia areata? I think you're jumping through dangerous hoops to try to get your hair back. I mean, blocking JAK is bad. Jack is a good thing. We don't want to block our immune system's ability to protect us for the sake of growing hair when a diet change would lead to resolution of alopecia. Like alopecia is an autoimmune condition and is very responsive to diet change. I've seen cases of full reversal of alopecia areata and with the no grain, no pain diet. Sometimes it's not, I mean, sometimes you got to go a little deeper where you have to look at other on what's restricted in no grain, but because sometimes people have unique or individual food sensitivities and allergies. But alopecia areata, I mean, to me, a lot of these new biologic medications and JAK inhibitors, these new classes of medications that they're rolling out, one, they're thousands of dollars a month, they're extremely expensive. Number two, long term, they're very dangerous because they're inhibiting your immune system's capacity to regulate you from your environment. And so, um, just not, in my opinion, not a great idea. Menstrual cramping issues for adolescents is usually lack of certain vitamin mineral. Can be. Magnesium would be if they're cramping, look at magnesium first, especially in teenagers and adolescents because they eat terribly. And because they eat so much sugar, they really, sugar causes magnesium dumping through the kidneys. So you lose a ton of magnesium with high carbohydrate, high sugar, high processed food diets, which most adolescents are on. And so if she's having a severity of menstrual cramping, I would start with that as just the first thing to look at. What products from your website do you recommend for SIBO methane? So SIBO methane is you're referring to SIBO as in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I'm assuming methane can be yeast, and a lot of doctors will use antibiotics like rifaximin to treat, SIBO-like problems with methane and or hydrogen. But methane can also be yeast. And so if you're talking about on our website, what products that I would recommend, one would be a probiotic called Body Defense with S. boulardii. Another one would be caprylic acid. Another would be ultra berberine. Would be good places to start. But even deeper than that, I always, when somebody says they have SIBO, I always question the diagnosis. The vast majority of people I've seen that come into me that have been told they have SIBO, they're coming to me because the rifaximin and the other treatments don't work, and it's because their problem really isn't a bacterial problem. It's typically a fungal problem or a food-based problem, like they're eating the wrong foods, and that part wasn't investigated or looked at. So, don't dismiss those if you haven't already looked into them. Do so. I'd like to know why red light therapy for over 10 minutes triggers my mast cells to go crazy and start degranulating. So what I hear you saying, Stephanie, is that you have a mast cell problem, and when you do red light for longer periods, you really become more symptomatic. If you have a diagnosis of ME or chronic fatigue syndrome, it's because you're in mold. Most likely 90, I think it's 92, 93% of people with those two diagnoses have environmental mold poisoning and don't know it, or do know it and haven't done anything about it. Red light therapy, um, is going to recruit blood flow to tissue. So if you're concentrating red light therapy in a particular area, especially, you're going to bring those immune mast cells into that area. You're going to increase blood flow to that area. And if those cells are already prone to degranulation, you're going to have an increased symptom. You need to really get with a good doctor who's mold literate to measure and test you for potential mold problem. Let's see here. Hi, Dr. Osborne. I live in Jamaica. This is from Fran. And I want you to know you saved my life. It's been about 10 docs in 10 years suffering until I found you on YouTube. I bought your book, did glutenology and your supplements. Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Fran. And I'm glad that my work was able to help you. We'll chalk you up to one of the 100 million lives saved that we're aiming to hit. What about a colonoscopy for folks who have colons that think they are gardens? Would a Cologuard be better option, as docs like to remove polyps during colonoscopy? Yeah, you could do a Cologuard as a first pass. You know, sometimes the doctors now are using Cologuard as a tool to say, if this is normal, don't worry about the colonoscopy. And so it's non-invasive; it's a stool specimen. So if you know, like I said, if that makes you feel better about it, more power to you. But I don't believe in pre-screening with the Cologuard just for the sake of screening. I believe that if you have a problem, seek a solution out to the problem. But if you don't have a problem, be careful of the counsel you keep, because you may be finding that the problem you didn't have that's being called a problem becomes a bigger problem because of the treatments that are being recommended and the fear that's being thrown at people. Fear porn is a very real psychology used by the profession to get people, or to force compliance in a lot of times into therapies and treatments that aren't necessary. Let's see here. How is it possible to get a consultation with you? I live in Finland. Yeah, reach out to my team, man. You can call. Um, you can also go to our website and schedule a consultation, and you know, email my office, and they can, if you can't call, they can set up like a telecommunication with Zoom, and you can. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link to my practice in the feed for you, and you can communicate, go there and directly, and you can reach out to my team, and they can walk you through the next steps if you want to consult. SPMs. Now that I'm feeling improvement. Oh, I like that. I love SPMs. They're one of my favorite supplements. Do I stay on the same dose or cut back? Depends. Were you taking 4 a day? Were you taking 2? Were you taking 3? A maintenance dose for SPM is 2 capsules a day. So depending on what you were taking, if you're feeling well, 2 a day is generally what I recommend if you're just doing maintenance. Sometimes we go 4 in more therapeutic settings, but 2 a day. Which nutrients are most helpful for people who are sensitive to barometric pressure changes with migraines and body aches? Honestly, Melinda, I haven't seen any specific nutrients have any major effect on barometric pressure change. Probably the biggest thing would just be hydration more than anything else. But what we have seen when people have like storm storm alarms, like when the weather's changing and you know when the rain's going to come, or you know when a storm's going to come, and that's when you get the headache or the joint pain or whatever. What we have seen work really, really well in those situations is a combination of magnesium and SPM. Magnesium generally 600 to 1,000 milligram dose, and SPM you're looking at 2 to 4 capsules of SPM. Your opinion on bioresonance, is it safe? Do you recommend it? For what? You know, what my opinion on bioresonance for what specifically? My friend has osteoarthritis and her TMJ. They have her on ibuprofen, 600 milligrams every 6 hours. And if it doesn't work, they're sending her to a specialist to do surgery. Oh man, if she's got TMJ, go see a good chiropractor. Good chiropractor can adjust that joint and provide tremendous relief. And sometimes TMJ is there's a disc inside that joint, and that sometimes has to be manipulated. Sometimes it's the pterygoid muscles inside. There's if you get sometimes a doctor can get the hand or the fingers inside, and there's a muscle group right up there where the jaw connects, and that you can get a spasm and you can get tremendous adhesions in that muscle group, and sometimes that has to be worked out in order to get TMJ relief. So those are definitely things I would consider. Outside of that, magnesium just as a natural muscle relaxer, you can also use things like valerian and theanine and GABA because those act on the muscle to kind of help relax the muscle. But 600 milligrams of ibuprofen every 6 hours is going to wreck that girl's gut. It's going to wreck her intestines. I had a patient. Oh gosh, this probably was about 3 years ago. He's a young man, and he was on that level of ibuprofen. They had him on it was 600-800 milligrams every several hours for a long time. This was for a couple of years. Anyway, they ended up having to remove like 12 inches of his intestine because of the damage the ibuprofen did. So that stuff's no joke. I mean, if you needed it one day for an acute onset of pain, that's very different than taking it aggressively over many days or weeks or months. So I would just be real cautious. What percentage of the body needs to be exposed to get any benefit from sunlight? As much as you can. As close to naked as you can be, but if you can't be, some exposure on the face is better than no exposure anywhere. But ideally, tank top, shorts, the more surface area you can have exposed to the sunlight, the more absorption of light you're going to have. But remember that we're talking about ultraviolet therapy as it relates to skin because red lights pass through clothing. So if you're wearing clothing, you're still going to get the red light benefits from sun. It's just that you won't get the benefits of the ultraviolet. Ultraviolet has a harder time penetrating clothing. Remember, the shorter the wavelength, the harder it is to penetrate through things. So ultraviolet needs to touch your skin, the red light, not so much. If you cleanse your liver, can you tolerate oxalates better? I was drinking green smoothies, and they gave me sulfur-smelling bumps and stool. If you're not, well, one, drinking green smoothies, there's so much oxalate in a green smoothie. That's like an oxalate bomb. So if you're already, let's say your zinc or vitamin B6 deficiency, not really super capable of breaking oxalate down, it's a bad idea. The other aspect there is, do you have a yeast overgrowth? Because many times people that develop oxalate problems develop them not so much from the food that they're eating, but develop them from the fact that they have a yeast overgrowth, and that yeast overgrowth inside of you, yeast produce oxalates. So a lot of that burden comes from the little mini yeast oxalate factories that are just spewing oxalate out into your system, thus driving your level higher than what your body can handle. So you might consider looking into whether or not you do have a yeast overgrowth. The most common place to find those is in your GI tract. Do we need to be concerned about balance of potassium when taking magnesium? No. I mean, if you're eating healthy food, you're going to get healthy quantities of potassium as a general rule. But if you're taking, 600 milligrams of magnesium a day, do you need to be worried about potassium per se? No, not really. Okay. Dr. O, a couple of years ago, I listened to you on here about the importance of sunlight, its benefits, and the brainwashing from conventional dermatologists. I'm very fair skinned, blonde hair, blue eyes, live in the north. Each year since listening to you, I do the following the months of April through September. I start laying out in the grass on an organic cotton bed sheet for 5 minutes a day in front and 5 in the back, and built up to 25 minutes to each side. The amount of energy I get, better sleep, happiness, relaxation all around, feel goodness from the sun, and grounding is astounding. And I look beautiful with a tan. I bet you do. Thank you for spreading the word on all the free, wonderful things the sunlight has to offer. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your experience with sunlight. I love it. I love it when fair skinned people share their experience, because there's no excuse. Fair skin doesn't negate the fact that you still need sunlight. My friend is having a fit. He has a pacemaker and takes medicine that I know can complete the minerals such as BP meds, Eliquis, metformin. You mean deplete the minerals. She also has type 2 diabetes. Her doctor wants to do an ablation in the future. What mineral test do you have, and what level should the minerals be if this is the reason? It's not what mineral test and what the minerals should be. It's that your friend needs to make a decision about what her philosophy is around this arena, because for the most part, people that have pacemakers and are on blood pressure meds and Eliquis and metformin don't, frankly, I'm going to just be frank, they don't give a shit about natural care. They don't care about minerals because they don't really understand it. They've never learned about it. And they're generally, as a mindset, they think that their medical doctor is right and that all this other stuff that we talk about day in and day out is just crazy quackery. That's the reality. I mean, I'm a realist. That being said, if your friend is open to wanting to come to this side of things and explore the philosophy around this, it's not a matter of what mineral and what level. It's more a matter of why does your friend need all of those medicines in the first place? And you have to get to the root of that, because if you're not getting to the root of that, there's not a mineral that's going to save that person. There's not like, okay, potassium is going to make all that better, or magnesium is going to make all that better. Those are just places to start from the detriment of being on those medicines for so long, because your friend didn't most likely develop high blood pressure and thick blood and electrolyte imbalances through the heart because of a single nutrient mineral deficiency, probably from years of bad eating and not getting sunshine, not sleeping well, bad behaviors. And so that person has to be willing to make all the right changes. And they have to play the active role. You can't, what I've learned over the years is a person is either ready or they're not. This is why I don't do any convincing for anyone. I just educate. If people that show up and want to get educated, they come. I don't advertise. I just educate. And the reason why is that when you try to convince somebody of something that they're not ready to be convinced of, you're wasting your time. Even if they're your friend, even if you love them, even if they're a dear family member, you're not going to change somebody else's philosophy or ideology. You're only going to hit a brick wall of frustration, and then you're going to create rift in the relationship that that you don't want either. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful for you, but that's what just some wisdom that I've seen over the years. Let's see, answered that one. Marie says, I did testing and found out I'm allergic to aspergillus and penicillium. It was in my home, and we'll be doing a remediation in about 3 weeks. Any recommendations or protocols? Yeah, I just finished chapter 1 of my new book. So we're gonna be putting up a mold protocol here, hopefully in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. Marie. So you can stay tuned for that. If you aren't, you can go to Moldjacked and sign up for our newsletter there, and we're going to be mailing it out once it's completed. As far as remediation is concerned, I would say the biggest thing would be when you finish remediation before you pay your final bill, make sure that you have a really good mold inspector come out to do something called post-remediation assessment. There, think of them as your safeguard for making sure the remediation company did the work they said they were going to do. And so a good ERMI or MSQ-PCR follow-up test after remediation, and then an 8-week MSQ-PCR test, after everything really settles out, to make sure that everything was properly done. And as far as detoxification, I'll be rolling that out very soon. It's going to be very comprehensive and in depth. So thanks for being patient with me. Let's see here. Is it more important to continue using Ultra Q and Detox C even if bowels are not shaped looser than normal for supporting post-surgical recovery? Yes, post-surgery, you're trying to saturate. You want those things to support your recovery, your tissue, your collagen formation and recovery. Do you have an opinion on the hydrogen inhalation machines? Yeah, I think it's all hype. I think all the hydrogen water is a waste of time. I think hydrogen machines are a waste of time. And we've tried this stuff. I mean, I've read the research on it and seen some of the things, and I think I just haven't seen the clinical outcomes that others are reporting. So we were in clinic, we were not able to replicate what was being published. So in my opinion, if you're trying for hydrogen, if you're looking at all these hydrogen water bottles or inhalation, I think bang for buck, it's not worth your time and effort. Regarding SPMs, how long taking for a day does it take to start eliminating pain and reduce inflammation? Anywhere from 2 to 4, and even as many as 6 weeks, Gina. I always recommend at least 4 weeks before making any kind of assessment on SPMs, but sometimes even a little bit longer than that, and sometimes quicker than that. I've seen them work really within a week's time as well. So, but hopefully that gives you a little context around it. Deborah's asking, what hours are the best to get vitamin D in the sun? How long should you stay in the sun without sunscreen? Long as your skin tolerates it. But there's a really good app you can download called, it's the Vitamin D app. So because the question is, what are the best hours to get vitamin D? It depends on where you live, depends on what latitude you're in. And this app, the Vitamin D app, has you can put in your address, or you don't have to put in your physical address, but you can put in your city, state, etc. And the app will tell you what peak times based on where you live to maximize your vitamin D production. As a general rule, like 10 to noon is a good time frame as a general rule. But if you want to get uber specific, I would encourage you to check that app out. My hands started locking up on me and going numb. I started taking the B vitamin. I don't eat grain. I don't know what's going on with my hands and keep thinking, well, maybe it's my wrist, maybe it's my elbow because I play pickleball, maybe it's my shoulder because of my posture. They hurt, like I'll get out and they'll always feel like they're swelling. Get them checked out, Deb. I mean, you could have a tennis elbow if you're playing a lot of pickleball, and there's a nerve entrapment that can occur. at the elbow that can cause those symptoms. That's a physical entrapment. Carpal tunnel is another, right here in the wrist is another area where you can get the median nerve entrapment. But those things can be assessed by a good doc. And if it's a physical thing, those things can be treated. There's laser therapies and different manual and manipulative therapies that can be used to treat and help to resolve that kind of problem. And it could also be nutritional. A lot of times when we see neuropathies developing, it can be B vitamins, but it can also be things like alpha lipoic acid. And so you might, if you haven't already, consider maybe some nutritional testing to determine whether or not you have a need for a nutrient that may be driving this sensation for you as well. All right. I was told to take 800 milligrams of Motrin every 8 hours, and later went to the doc and found UTI, no symptoms. First question asked was, "Are you taking Motrin?" I said, "No, not anymore." Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing we didn't talk about earlier, but ibuprofen, Motrin, naproxen, any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory is very hard on the kidneys, and it can strip away the mucosal lining there as well, increasing the risk for UTIs and kidney damage. So glad you found out and got rid of it. Is DMSO good for anything? It's really good for pain. It can be good for pain and inflammation. So yes, but specifically, I don't like it when people take something for pain without understanding why they have the pain in the first place. I'm all for pain reduction with intelligent investigation simultaneously. That way their quality of life improves, but also they figure out why the pain's there and they can address that at its root. Okay, let's see here. I think I got most of your questions answered today. What would be a good electrolyte drink mix, in your opinion? What would be a good electrolyte drink? Okay. There's several brands that are out there that are relatively okay. The problem with most of them that I don't like is that they put a bunch of garbage in them, a bunch of flavoring agents. So it's like your option to drink an electrolyte is like you have to drink Kool-Aid or something that tastes like Kool-Aid just to get electrolytes into you. So I personally prefer salt, adding salt into the water itself. And but that's just my opinion. I don't like all the sweetening agents, even though they're sweetened with stevia. It's just not something that I'm a huge fan of. And a lot of them contain natural flavors, and you have a hard time deciphering where natural flavors sometimes come from. So it's not that all natural flavors are bad, but a lot of them are corn derivative. And because my message is no grain, no pain, we try to help people and try to help people understand that avoiding GMO corn-based products in order to get healthy. So a lot of those products do contain that. So just good old-fashioned salt in your water is what I generally tend to recommend. Okay, I think that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor, support our mission. You can do that in several ways. Number one, you can simply go to glutenfreesociety.org and sign up there for our newsletter. We'll send you a bunch of free information that you can share with other people, right? We need to get this message out to the masses. We are one of the most censored platforms in health, and appreciate your ability to help us get the information out to the people that need it the most. That's our mission, save 100 million lives. If you're looking for high quality supplements that are gluten and grain free, please come visit us at glutenfreesociety.org. We have over 100 products, including lab testing for those of you who want to do testing for nutritional deficiencies, or gluten sensitivity or food sensitivities, we offer those services, and we really appreciate you using them, because that's what keeps the lights on over here. That's what keeps the show going. So we don't allow third-party advertisers into our world, because we don't want to sell our souls for money. But we do appreciate your patronage. So thank you so much. We'll be back here on Tuesday at 6 p.m., as we are every week, for another crash course on the Dr. Osborne Zone. And we'll be back again on Thursday at 12:30 for another live Q&A. So bring me your toughest questions. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next